And look, people, it has never been so crucial to comprehend what is at risk at this very moment. And this book here clearly demonstrates that. Yes, it is something to be concerned about. There's a very serious dispute in the world, and evil, more than ever, is growing. Alexander Dugin is a Russian political scientist who has come to influence the political and military elite of Russia, including Vladimir Putin. Dugin is, let's say, Putin's philosopher. He advocates opposition to Western nations, leading the Eurasian movement, so that the East, with Russia and China in command, along with the Islamic countries alongside these two nations, imposes its worldview on the international stage. The debate between Olavo de Carvalho and Alexander Dugin starts with the following question. What are the historical, political, ideological, and economic factors and actors that currently define the dynamics and configuration of power in the world? And what is the position of the United States of America in what is known as the New World Order? Olavo and Dugin agree on the following: that the meta-capitalists, George Soros, Bill Gates, the Rockefeller and Rothschild families, the owners of the great world fortunes, represent a risk, a great risk. I am going to read a passage from Olavo about this. Instead of favoring free market capitalism, the globalist project has given a strong hand to statist and controlling policies everywhere, which is not different in this aspect from the interventionism advocated by the Eurasians. And what are the meta-capitalists? They are capitalists who have become rich in the regime of economic freedom and who no longer want to continue submitting to market fluctuations. According to Olavo, these individuals are credited with inventing socialism of the grand lords and social engineers who serve them. And Dugin sort of confuses the Western countries, which are led by the United States, with the meta-capitalists, who belong to the financial elite. According to his writing, the United States is an absolute plague to humanity, and the globalist elite is the quintessence and epitome of the United States. Olavo de Carvalho argues that the United States is not the command center of the globalist project, but rather its primary victim, emphasizing its top priority status. Olavo points out that there are three projects of global domination, which he calls Russian, Chinese, Western, and Islamic. The Russian-Chinese scheme connected to the geopolitical and military perspective, the Western one to the economic perspective, and the Islamic one to the dispute of religions. Professor Olavo wrote the following: for the first time in history, the three essential modalities of power, political, military, economic, and religious, are personified in distinct supranational blocks, each with their plans for world domination and their peculiar modes of action. And he further adds here, it is not an exaggeration to say that the world we live in today is the subject of a dispute between the military, bankers, and preachers. Olavo makes it explicitly clear that in order to successfully carry out his plans, Dugin heavily relies on the armed forces of Vladimir Putin, the armies of Russia and China, and all terrorist organizations in the Middle East, as well as virtually all leftist, fascist, and neo-Nazi movements that, at present, are actively involved in this project. If Professor Olavo sees the Muslims separate from the Russian-Chinese bloc in the struggle for world power, that does not mean that these two groups cannot unite against the Western bloc, the so-called Western bloc. It is somewhat reminiscent of what we have witnessed today with Israel confronting the Hamas terrorists. And Professor Olavo quotes, in fact, theorists of the caliphate who claim that socialism, once it achieves victory worldwide, will necessitate a soul, and Islam will be the force that furnishes it. I am informing you, gentlemen, that the world is exceedingly dangerous. The Russo-Chinese bloc pretends to be an ally of the United States in the fight against terrorism. But in reality, it provides weapons and support to terrorist organizations, anti-American regimes such as Iran and Venezuela. Dugin doesn't pretend, no. I'm going to read a passage from this debate with Olavo de Carvalho, and he says the following. for you to see the danger that all of us face in this struggle for global power. We have no yes. Which is the worst block, where there's more evil? Olavo wrote the following words to describe it. Russians and Chinese have already proven to have a degree of brutality, of evil, of disrespect for human life that transcends the possibilities of the most hateful Islamic suicide bomber or the coldest and most Machiavellian Western banker. For him, Olavo, Russians, and Chinese are two hordes of assassins who, instead of paying for the crimes they committed against their own people, now claim, with an air of innocence, sanctity, and even divine authority, a chance to expand it on a global scale. Olavo acknowledges that neutralizing or disarming the three blocs that contend for global power is an incredibly challenging undertaking. But he references the Christian communities of all nations, the Jewish state, and conservative American nationalism. He emphasizes that the foundation of the American nation is based on the concept that the cohesive force of society is not the government or the armed state bureaucracy, but rather society itself, encompassing its culture, religion, traditions, and moral values. Dugin is unabashed in expressing that his goal is to recruit soldiers for the fight against the West and the establishment of the Eurasian Empire, without any sense of shame or hesitation. And the answer provided by Olavo is both clear and winning. He explicitly states the following. Professor Dugin is an overt preacher of war and genocide. He admits that he despises the whole Western world and that his stated goal is to incite a third global conflict, eradicate the West from existence, and establish what he personally defines as a worldwide dictatorship in every corner of the globe. To conclude this review, I will quote a passage from Professor Olavo de Carvalho in this debate with Dugin. That's how it is. My goal is to try to understand the political situation of the world so that we are not reduced to the condition of blind people in a shootout in the middle of the global fight, so that we are not dragged by the whirlwind of history like leaves in the storm without knowing where we came from or where we are being taken. The path is definitely not the one proposed by Alexander Dugin. It is not a path of revolution, nor is it about imposing statist and collectivist policies as suggested by Dugin. That's it, guys. That was my literary review for today of this book here, The United States and the New World Order, a debate between Alexander Dugin and Olavo de Carvalho. The book can be found in my digital bookstore, livrariadolacom.com.br, as well as all the books authored by Professor Olavo de Carvalho. Thank you very much for your attention, and until the next literary review.